Hi, I'm Michael Yardney, and if you haven't given yourself a New Year's resolution yet, here's one for you. Take advantage of this current stage of the property cycle. Buy the right property in the right location, and you're going to do very well in the long term. The good news is that Santa has brought us one of the presents at the top of our wish list as property investors. Confirmation that we're going to have a great year in the property markets in Australia. Now, by that I don't mean we're going to have a property boom. I see 2011 as a very different year to 2010. And in fact 2009. But then every year I've been investing in, and that's been since the early 1970s, every year has been a different year. And before you call me an eternal optimist saying it's always a good time to buy property, I'd like to suggest I'm a realist. I can see the market for what it is, and I've enough on-the-ground experience and knowledge from my team at Metropole throughout Australia to know what's happening in the various markets. But I've also got enough perspective, gained from buying and selling and investing through 7 property cycles, to interpret what that information means. And what I now see are 5 green lights to selectively buy investments in the early part of 2011. But before I discuss those with you, I'd like to quickly mention to you 2 great video programs that I'd like you to consider buying to help you take advantage of the property markets in 2011. Firstly, there's Building Wealth Through Property Investment, where for 4 hours over 2 DVDs, you get my strategies that have worked really well for me since the 1970s. I've fine-tuned them, I've improved them, but they're strategies that are known, proven and trusted. And you can buy it individually or together with a great DVD about the mindset of successful property investors. And if you click on the link below, you'll be able to get details about these programs and buy them so you can take advantage of the property markets in 2011. So let's have a talk about what's in store. I see 5 green lights. Number 1, we have a stable Australian economy. You see, Australia's economy's vital signs are healthy, and the economy is performing much better than almost every other developed nation. Now, ultimately, indicators like strong employment levels, wages and productivity growth, and manageable inflation, those drive prosperity and demand for goods in Australia, including driving the demand for property. But watch out, every year there's one, I guess what I call an X factor, one unknown that pops up and surprises us and surprises the economy. 3 years ago was the subprime crisis overseas and its effects on the world financial markets. In 2009, the Australian government's financial stimulus, comprising of those deep interest rate cuts and the fiscal stimulus, this had our market surprised on the upside and gave them resilience at a time when almost everybody was expecting a recession. Last year, in 2010, successive interest rate rises caused our property markets to stall. No one predicted this level of interest rate rises at the beginning of the year or how the property market would stall mid-year, even though I was amongst those who saw it coming by mid-year. Now, by definition, being an unknown X factor, I've got no idea what's going to crop up this year. But something always crops up to surprise us, so be ready. Green light number 2, I see an increased demand but a lack of dwelling supply. But not everywhere. A lot's been written about the remarkable growth in immigration levels over the last few years, plus the baby boom we're having that's boosting demand for housing. And while it's often said that there's a shortage of dwellings around Australia, it's not actually correct. While there's definitely some areas where there's more demand than supply, like some of the lifestyle inner city suburbs of Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane and our capital cities, there are really areas where there's no shortage of housing, or no housing shortage. Just look at the outer suburbs. There's still plenty of land to house all the families who want to live there, plus more. While affordability may be an issue in these suburbs, there's clearly no shortage of supply, and there are many builders who can whip up new homes if demand picks up. We're also heading for an oversupply of apartments in our CBDs, in particular Melbourne and Brisbane, and to a lesser extent Sydney. Just open the Saturday paper and you can see what I mean. There's going to be too many off-the-plan developments coming on stream in our CBDs in the next few years. And this is going to come at the same time that we're going to have falling demand from fewer overseas students coming to Australia. But in our inner suburbs, not the inner city, but the inner suburbs, in our middle ring suburbs, of many of our capital cities, there's still a shortage of supply and continuing strong demand. Plus, that development that is occurring is going to happen at a higher cost, higher land cost, higher infrastructure cost, higher building costs, which means the value of those new developments, as they eventually will come on stream, are going to rise substantially. And this, of course, is going to have a positive effect on the established properties that people like you and I own. Green light number 3 is demographics. Our population is fragmenting, with more people living on their own, which means that we need more dwellings just to house the same number of people. At the same time, we're living longer. All of this means more people will be seeking more accommodation, both as tenants and owner-occupiers, pushing up the value of the properties and pushing up rents. Green light number 4 for 2011. Rents are going to strengthen in 2011. With around about 160,000 new households being formed each year and affordability of housing decreasing, it means more people are going to become tenants over the next few years. However, with demand for rental properties outstripping supply, and at the moment we've got a time of record low vacancies and fewer investors bringing new properties onto the market, and low housing starts, all this put together means that rents are going to rise even further over the next few years. The rental boom has only just begun. And the 5th green light that's giving us the go-ahead to invest wisely, sensibly in property is steady interest rates. Last year saw a heap of interest rate rises, and even though it's likely there's going to be further rises this year, unless the economy runs ahead of itself, which I guess on one hand will be really good for property, but unless it runs ahead of itself, the Reserve Bank's likely to be conservative with interest rate increases this year. Okay, putting all this together, it means that 2011 is going to be a great time to buy properties, because now we're in a buyer's market. We're at that stage of the cycle that we call a buyer's market. But the funny thing is about buyer's market, this is a time when buyers don't buy. But it's a time that sophisticated investors buy good properties and set themselves up for the next stage of the property cycle. But as you've heard me say before, you've got to be careful, because not all properties are going to increase in value, not all properties are going to perform well. Our property markets are going to become, well, they already are, I guess, fragmented and patchy. Some suburbs will outperform while others will underperform. Houses within some of those suburbs will increase in value and some will be duds. As interest rates increase, and they will over the next year or two, affordability will be one of the key issues that limits property price growth in most of our suburbs. Affordability will continue falling as property prices increase and interest rates increase. But this will affect some areas more than others. Think about it. First homeowners and those living in working class suburbs and in some of those outer suburbs, they're likely to be affected more, aren't they? On the other hand, those who own properties in the more affluent suburbs and the middle ring suburbs of our capital cities, those that have exhibited strong capital growth over the last few years, they're sitting on a heap of equity. They're really not going to be worried by housing affordability. Those inner and middle ring suburbs are likely to outperform and keep outperforming throughout this year, and they're likely to lead, I guess, to a three-tiered market, especially in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. The more affluent suburbs near the city, near the water, are going to become even more expensive and strongly outperform the averages, because owner-occupiers there, they've got more disposable income. They're not going to be hurt as much by the rising interest rates, and investors are going to chase the small number of properties coming onto the market in those locations. As more and more home buyers and investors find they're priced out of the inner ring suburbs, they're going to move to the more affordable suburbs in the neighbouring middle rings. They're also going to increase in value, but maybe not as much as they did last year. However, the outer suburbs are usually where new homeowners are more interest rate sensitive, and with currently already many of them struggling to meet their mortgages, it's the likelihood that further increases in 2011 mean that property values in these suburbs are going to languish. And of course there's going to be a glut of off-the-plan properties coming on stream in the CBDs, which means there's huge potential problems there. I'd avoid the CBD. I look forward to sending you your next update in 2 weeks' time.